Hey garden nerds, I'm Christy Wilhelmi. It's citrus season and I'm here in front of our lemon table, just as a fitting location to talk about citrus. I want to talk to you about pruning citrus specifically. I have an older video that gives you the basics of pruning, that being dead, diseased, and disorderly, and pruning fruit trees specifically, but citrus is a little bit different because it doesn't defoliate. It's producing sometimes year-round, and so it can be a little bit confusing as to what to prune and when. So let's take a look. The basics of pruning are indeed the 3 Ds: dead, diseased, and disorderly. So let's take a look at what that looks like. Dead is pretty clear. On a citrus tree, it often looks very white, like driftwood, as you can see in this video, and it snaps really easily off of the branches, and or if you cut it off, it's going to feel almost hollow inside. It comes away really easily from the living wood, and it's pretty easy to remove. Honestly, sometimes the best way to access all of the dead material on your citrus tree is to get on your back and slide under it like a car mechanic, and then you can clip away all the stuff that's just kind of cluttering everything up. The next thing is diseased, which in citrus speak, it isn't necessarily diseased you're going to run into, is more infested. A lot of citrus gets leaf miners or mealybugs or whitefly or aphids in the new smaller growth or the top growth, and that's what you're going to be pruning away. Oftentimes you'll see curled up leaves or leaves that have veins running through them, like you can see in this video. Those are leaf miners and they can be removed. It's simply a cosmetic disorder. It isn't something that's really going to hamper the production of the fruit tree, but it's a good idea to cut them away to give the plant a chance for some new growth. To remove the tip growth, the best thing to do is to find an outward-facing leaf node or bud and cut back to that. The next of the 3 Ds is disorderly, and disorderly is more of an aesthetic reference to shape, how you want your tree to be shaped. Now, most citrus trees grow in a bush form. Sometimes if you have a standard or a semi-dwarf citrus tree, you'll want to grow that more like a topiary with a distinct trunk and then a canopy. But most of the time in a home orchard, you're going to grow your trees more compactly and shorter so that you don't have to get a ladder out in order to harvest. And for that, it's best to grow it in a bush form. So when you see disorderly in a bush form, it's going to look like water sprouts that shoot straight up in the air or straight out to the sides, and they never produce fruit. They're just usually a lot more space between the leaf sets, and it's really obviously not part of that overall bush shape. So get out your pruning shears and cut those all the way back to the branch where they're growing from using a removal cut, which means you're basically cutting it off right at the collar, the branch collar, and leaving it at that. Other forms of disorderly include things like suckers growing up from the base of the trunk or growing out from the lower part of the trunk. Just trim those off using removal cuts right up to the collar of the branch, and that will take care of it. You may need to repeat this every season because a lot of root suckers and funky branch growth is persistent, but keep after it and you'll keep your tree maintained nicely. Beyond the 3 Ds, it's a good idea every once in a while to open up the canopy of the citrus tree. And for me, what that means is removing usually the lower growing branches off of main scaffold branches that are growing horizontally out. So you're cutting off your vertical branches that are growing either up or down. Now you may opt for cutting the upper branches off because fruit hangs on the lower branches and that's more conducive to them not bending and breaking. So prune away those branches that are growing up and filling up the space, and that's going to open up the canopy of the tree to a lot more airflow, which will help keep it healthier overall. Next, let's talk about timing, because a lot of people ask me, when do you prune citrus? Well, typically you can prune citrus anytime you like. What happens though is you can risk losing some of next year's productive branches. So the best way to time it is, if you can, prune right after the fruit has ripened, but before the tree starts flowering again. Now, as you can see in this video, sometimes that happens at the same time. There's an overlap, and so you do your best to make your decisions to not cut away the flowering branches that are going to produce your next season's fruit, but definitely trim back any branches that are hanging low. Even if they have fruit on them, wait for them to ripen and then pull the fruit off and cut those branches back right away. So those are the basics of pruning citrus. This works for your oranges, your lemons, your tangerines, and everything in between. If you like this video, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe and click on the notification button to find out when our next video comes online. Of course, you'll find this kind of information and so much more in my book that's coming out March 2021, Grow Your Own Mini Fruit Garden, and of course a ton of other gardening information for your veggie garden and Gardening for Geeks. Also, if you like this video, consider becoming a Patreon subscriber to support all the free stuff that we do here at Gardenerd. And of course, happy gardening!